Hi guys, welcome back to part 2 of our video on pacing. Remember, pacing basically means metering your effort over a ride. So not expending too much of your energy too soon, or similarly not saving your energy right till the end and then going hell for leather with like 1 minute to go in the race, hoping that's going to save you, from losing the race. That's not going to happen. The optimum pacing strategy spreads out your energy in the most efficient way so that it is optimal over the course conditions. Now, speaking of course conditions, we're not talking today about complex environmental conditions like lots of hills, pacing into the wind. That's a very complicated area. In fact, credit where credit's due. I want to acknowledge Best Bike Split here, bestbikesplit.com. If you choose your course conditions uploaded from your Garmin or other head unit, and then feed in your power and bike details, it will give you the optimum pace strategy based on some absolutely brilliant behind the scenes mathematics. So credit where credit's due to Best Bike Split. But pacing itself, pacing strategies are much misunderstood. There's probably no other area in cycling which is as much discussed but poorly referenced and poorly thought through. So here on Fast Fitness Tips, what we're going to do today is something I hope you'll agree is useful. We're going to give you a demo version of our calculator for free. You can get the more advanced version at minimal cost. I'll put the link below. And we're going to follow 8 riders riding their FTP test, because nothing will help you understand pacing pros and cons, mistakes and flaws, better than seeing 8 real riders ride their test. And what better way to do it now than Zwift? We can take riders who are undertaking their 20-minute FTP test, sync them all up, and then look at their pacing by calculating their watts through their course, which is displayed on the screen anyway, both as instantaneous watts and hopefully watt averages. We can get a lot of information from that. Just a quick word on our pacing calculator. The pacing calculator basically normalizes all the pacing strategies around your desired watts. So let's say you're a 250 watt rider, you type in 250 watts, and then all the strategies will try and get you roughly to 250 watts, plus or minus the few percent that you lose through pacing pros and cons. So it doesn't compare a 200 watt rider with a 350 watt rider. It compares 8 strategies for riding 300 watts over a course, but tells you if you use strategy A, like J-shape, how does that compare to strategy 7, such as hypervariable, or strategy 6, for example, negative split. Okay, so it's comparing the different pacing strategies, and it will give you a pretty good estimate of what you'll win and lose over certain pacing strategies. Now, in the advanced version of the calculator, it will scale it depending on how much you go up and down during that race. So for example, if your average watts is 300 through that race, but you fall to 250 at a certain point because you're struggling, let's say at the halfway stage, the advanced calculator will scale that. The advanced calculator will also plot a graph, and it will also give you your RPE for each sector. How much effort should you expend straight out of the gate? How much effort at minute 2, minute 3, minute 4? So the advanced version will give you all of those things. All the links are below, like I say. Now, on to our main part of this video, which is looking at 8 riders who are going to undertake their real FTP test. Now, in part 1 of this video, where we discussed pacing strategies in a bit more detail, you saw those riders already on the warm-up. Think of it like this. They're coming to the start gate now, and I'm going to narrate and follow them through their race, and then see what we can glean about their pacing strategies. Where did they go right? Where did they go wrong? Think about it as you're watching this. Compared to their average watts over the course of the event, how much do they let those watts go up and down? That's basically the key point in pacing. You've got your average pace line, which in an ideal world, you stick to the best that you could maintain over that race. So for example, if it was a 60-minute race, it would be your FTP. If you were able to follow your FTP like a machine throughout, like a robot, in theory, that would be your best pacing line. However, nobody can do that. So when you're watching this video, just watch how much does their instantaneous watts vary from their average watts. And the average, if they're on a new version of Zwift, is just shown on the second line in the top of the screen. Okay guys, that's enough. I'm really excited about this. Let's show you how these riders do over their 20-minute FTP test. Here we go, guys. And what we've got here is a model of pacing. This is a segment on your event. So if it was a 20-minute event, each of these time segments would be 1 minute. If it was a 60-minute event, obviously there would be 3 minutes, 2 minutes for a 40-minute event, and pro rata. And on the y-axis here, we've got hypothetical watts for a rider that's riding around 300 watt FTP. So what we're going to do is consider various pacing strategies around different riders who use different strategies, but they all got the same performance around 300 So this pattern that you see here, you'll notice that the rider starts off fairly sharp off the blocks at 360 watts. And remember their FTP is 300, so they're 20% above their FTP there. And they're falling down within the first 2 to 3 minutes to their FTP level at 300. But in fact, because of that very sharp start, they don't settle into 300 watts maintenance. They don't settle into that ideal kind of line. They are tracking just under that, around 5 to 10% under their FTP all the way through the event, and perhaps even struggling to hold that at midway. And this pattern of the peak at the beginning and a very similar peak at the end is sometimes called a twin peaks pattern or U-shaped pattern. It's derived an average watts here of around about 285, 286. So it's not a terrible strategy. It's like a mid-pack strategy, to be honest. But perhaps we can do better than this. So let's look at the next strategy. So this next strategy takes off some of that out of the blocks hotness, the over-enthusiasm, and it's reduced it to about 10% over the FTP at the very start, and it settles then more into a more tracking type of line. And then 2 to 3 minutes to go, they pick up similarly to the Twin Peaks pattern, and they finish very strong because they haven't burnt all their matches. That sprint to the line does make a difference, but it's a modest difference compared to that overall tracking underneath their FTP for all those minutes from, let's say, 2 to 18. And they finish at 290 watts overall. And we call that pattern a J-shape curve, because it's got a little kick at the beginning and a big kick at the end. The third strategy historically was considered the best strategy. This is called the negative split. So there's a very slight kick at the beginning. There's a fairly progressive decline, fairly substantial decline. The watts are actually lowest at the halfway stage. And the rider realizes that they're going slow. They try to pick it up and they put more and more effort. Remember, fatigue is very high at the 10-minute stage. So having that negative split and going for home, showing more average watts in the second half than the first half, that is a pretty big test. But in order to do that, you have to ride somewhat cautiously in that first half. In other words, you have to hold something back. But this is often quite an effective strategy, and there may be a little kick in the end, or there may be a gradual progressive increase as the rider races to the line. But it finishes around 286 here. So that classic negative split is a pretty good strategy historically, but it's generally beaten by some of these other alternative strategies. So let's go on to strategy 4 now. Now this strategy, if you look at it, the smaller the kick at the beginning, the more level the pace overall. And this level pace with perhaps a negative split or perhaps 50-50 or very close to 50-50, for example, is usually called an evens pace. So there's usually only a slight kick at the end, a strong finish for sure, but you're trying to hold that 300 FTP as close as you can all the way through. Now this strategy is obviously somewhat flawed. You can see the rider whose FTP is only 300 is starting off at 400 plus for the first 30, 60 or even 90 seconds. And they're dropping fairly quickly, but because they began so high, even at 1 minute, they're way above their FTP. And only at 3 minutes are they really settling in to their FTP level. They've burnt a lot of matches, meaning that the energy is used and the fatigue is accumulating very early for this rider. So they're rapidly falling under their FTP, and it's showing us this steep decline. Just after that halfway mark, but before 5 minutes to go, is probably psychologically the low point, and fatigue is not at the highest at that point, but the combination of that psychological effect and still very high fatigue means that the power is at the lowest at that point. The rider realizes their mistake, and they're desperate to see the line by this stage. Fatigue is extremely high, but they've only got 4, 3, 2 minutes to go. They manage to pick it up, but not to the FTP level until that last minute when they exceed with a slight kick at the end. And that gets them the average of around 280. So our next strategy then is this one. Have a look at this one. The rider doesn't really have any kick at the beginning. They actually are under their FTP from the start. It might be just slightly over for a few seconds, but the average for the minute is under the 300. And then they rapidly let the FTP decline to around, and they let it track 10 to 15% under their FTP for quite a long time. In fact, we can add trend line on the data. Let's have a look at the trend line. So the trend line on this chart is up all the way, which means the rider is beginning at their lowest point at the beginning and then increasing as the race goes on. And then of course they do have a strong kick. In fact, the strongest kick of any pattern, any pacing strategy seen here. So this low start and high end and gradual incline is basically a conservative or incline strategy. Even though it feels not too bad because the fatigue level is low at the beginning, you basically leave yourself way too much to catch up on in the end. Let's have a look at this one. So the rider begins above their FTP, but the rider does allow a decline. The rider is probably fatiguing in that first 2 to 3 minutes. This is a rider who probably is not ready for the event, and they realise their mistake if that trend line carried on in that first 1 to 4 minutes, they would be stopping the race. So they realize their mistake and they pick it up, but they pick it up a bit too extreme because they're picking up to the FTP, but their FTP is a struggle for them on that day. So as soon as they hit that FTP, rather than maintaining it, the trend line decreases again, just as it did in the first few minutes. And this time they can't pick it up as easily. Another deterioration towards 15, 16. For them, 5 minutes to go seems like a very, very long time. And only on the last 30 seconds can they exceed the FTP, and only then by a few percentage. So we just call this an inconsistent or unprepared pacing strategy. Very, very common. And when a rider is overextending themselves for the event. One last one to show you then. And this is a small kick at the beginning, and that would be just to get you off the line and up to speed, then tracking just above FTP by a few percentage points, but exactly on FTP is also fine for the first third of the race, and then just over for the first third, just under for the second third, but you're aware of the decline, and with 5 minutes to go, you've still got something in reserve. So then the last 30 or 60 seconds, try and kick for home. Usually there's a little bit of a kick there, obviously not as much as the Twin Peaks or the J-shape or the conservative strategy, but nevertheless a decent kick. You end up with a ride that actually hits your FTP. Okay, they're away and they're across the start line. Okay, so these guys are all doing their FTP test, the shorter version on Zwift, the 20-minute version. There's two protocols, but basically they both include that 20-minute core effort. Now the thing about the 20-minute core effort is it's based on the mean maximal power, essentially the best power you can maintain over that 20 minutes. So it's not the best power you can maintain at 5 minutes or at 10, it's the best power you can maintain over the 20 minutes. So you've got to remember that 20-minute is a paced effort. We're going to examine these 8 riders and see what different pacing strategies they use. Now to help us, Zwift has got a really good function, which is it's displaying the zones graphically at the bottom of the screen. So that tracing along the bottom of the screen that you can see on each rider's visual display is actually their zone analysis. So right off from the gun then we can analyze how did they approach that start line exit. Basically if you look at McPew and you look at Adam there on the top right, and you also look at Soren, they came out of the gun pretty hot. In fact, Adam came out the hardest of all, and we'll have to see later whether he pays for that effort. If you go for an all-out strategy, you're basically just hanging on the best you can, and 20 minutes is a hell of a long time for most riders to hang on. So generally the all-out strategy is a pretty weak one. We don't recommend the all-out strategy in anything really beyond a minute or two. You'll be surprised how quickly you can fatigue. Try it on the bike, guys. Try going all out from the gun and just see how quickly you fatigue. You'll be surprised how quickly that fatigue comes on. So let's have a look at these riders now. I mean, full credit to them, by the way, for doing the FTP test. Even the shorter version is a substantial effort. So I want to say right from the start, well done. Now, if you look at how Zwift grades these zones, it's actually using the rider's previous best up until today. So up until the day they did their current test, they're using their manually entered FTP or their FTP based on their casual riding in Zwift, or they may have done a previous FTP test. And Zwift will upgrade them if they get a PB or PR in this race. So let's have a look how they're doing now. We're 2 minutes 30 already into the race, and we should get an idea of their pacing. So essentially, if you track their power, that is effectively their pacing line over time. So for example, is it deteriorating? If it's an all-out strategy, they would tend to be deteriorating. If it's level and it's an even strategy, or is it a J strategy with a little kick at the beginning, a big kick at the end, we'll see from that pace line that they're maintaining. So if we start off looking at McPew in the top left there, McPew started in zone 5 in the orange, but has dropped down into zone 4, possibly even heading towards zone 3. No, mainly zone 4. You can see it, the yellow tracing is zone 4. Now that's quite typical of a rider that starts hard and then realizes that effort is a little bit too hard. After a minute or two, they're already struggling a little bit. By the way, nothing wrong with zone 4 throughout a ride. That's completely fine. Zone 4, around about 90% of FTP, that's pretty much where you want to be aiming for. Anything between 90 and 100, to 105 of FTP. That's quite appropriate. So don't worry about dropping into the yellow zone when you're trying for your effort. Now, because this is based on their previous effort, they might be in zone 5, i.e. orange, because they're setting a new PB. That's giving them a slight underestimate, if you like. So if you look at David, if you look at Adam, if you look at Soren, they're going along steadily in zone 5. But it might be because their grading is a little bit out of date now, if you see what I mean. Let's return to the pacing line. So McPew is struggling a tiny bit right now, but actually it's leveled out. If we look at Peheko is maintaining a level pace line, but is a little bit low, similar actually to Moe's Tavern. They've got something in common. After the gun, they didn't really go out hard, they went out easy. And they're in zone 3 and zone 4. In fact, if you look at Moe's Tavern, he's dropping into blue occasionally, which is zone 2. So what that's telling us is he's probably underperforming. He's going out too easy, probably too casual at this stage. Now I know there's still a long way to go, 15 minutes to go at this stage, but you know, it could be a little bit too easy in some ways. So we'll see whether his strategy pays off. But if it's too easy, we'll see his pace line gradually improve with time as he picks up towards the end. Now let's have a look at BP Peng. Now, BP Peng's pace line is very juddery. Now that tells you one of two things. Either there's a mechanical problem, or there's a lot of inconsistency in his power delivery. If there's a lot of inconsistency in the power delivery, he's up and down a lot. Now to be fair, he's not really dropping out of zone 4. He's pretty much in zone 4 or 5. So his average pace line may not be that bad, but it's very juddery, meaning his power delivery isn't necessarily that steady at the same time. Now let's have a look at Soren here. Now Soren's maintaining a good zone 5 delivery across the way. Look at the heart rate tracing. The heart rate tracing is gradually going up with time. The heart rate tracing's meant to go up, you know, as you go into the event. And actually, with 6 minutes gone now, your heart rate will already be 90 to 95% of your heart rate maximum. And we don't know what the heart rate maximum is for these riders. I don't have any way of knowing that. But we can tell by their heart rate tracing if they're wearing a heart rate monitor. And you can see, 6 riders are riding with a heart rate monitor, that they're putting in a good effort. So in fact, if you look at the heart rate tracing of all the riders, they're all on a progressive incline right now, which shows you they're all making a steady good effort. The one that's perhaps a little bit level, if you like, is probably Adam. But his heart rate's pretty high, it's a 172, so I wouldn't criticise it. If it starts to drop, then they've peaked too early. They peaked too early and they're actually resting up and the heart rate's recovering. So that can happen, but as yet it hasn't happened for our riders. Returning to Adam, his average is 237, and his instantaneous watts are 225, 228. So he's struggling to maintain his average. Now if you compare the rider's current versus average, that gives you another take on pacing. So essentially, if we look at David here, his average is at 273, but he's maintaining an average. His instantaneous watts is pretty much where his average watts is. So his pace line is going to be level. If your instantaneous watts is similar to your average watts, then your pace line is going to be level, and it's a good way to ride. If you know what your FTP is, unless you're trying to go for a PB or PR, try to keep your average just below where your 20-minute average will hopefully end up. So David is doing a really good job. In fact, he's not dropping out of zone 5 at all right now. His pace line is pretty level. It's the tiniest hint of a drop right now, but I wouldn't write home about that. Similarly, Soren's doing really well too. He's maintaining zone 5 all the way, dropping occasionally, very, very occasionally, to zone 3. McPew's going along steadily in zone 3. Cadence is 80, 82, 81. Now he has an older version of Zwift here, so we can't tell what his average is, which is a shame. And he's not wearing a heart rate monitor. I just wonder about his pacing strategy. There's a little bit of variability creeping into his baseline, which shows a little bit of inconsistency. So a few words about the riders and what we do or we don't know exactly. Basically, they've all put their data in the public domain. You can go on YouTube and watch their individual streams if you want. We know their power output. We know who's on Z-Power, that is Zwift's way of interpreting what's going on with the turbo trainer, versus who's on a power meter. In fact, just very quickly, we can see that McPew, Adam, PB Peng, and Moe's Tavern, and also Soren are on power meters. That compares to David Allen on Z-Power, Caleb Carl on Z-Power, and Peheko on Z-Power. I can also see that McPew, Adam, Caleb Carl are riding on Richmond, and the rest are riding on Watopia. It doesn't really matter what course they're riding. When you go into FTP mode on Zwift, even with a direct drive trainer, it puts you in free ride mode, meaning that you're setting your own power and setting your own gradient. The gradients and drafting doesn't work as it's illustrated on the screen. Think of it like this: everyone's effectively on the equivalent of a dumb trainer whilst they're doing FTP, because it's your pure output that counts. You're against yourself, against the clock. And for that reason, we're not interested in their total time here. We're not really interested in their power or even their watts per kilogram, even though you can just see it on the right hand side. No, what we're interested in is their pacing strategy. How even do they go with time? We can see from our modelling in the first half of this video that good strategies like a J-shape or evens, a few percentage points ahead of a rider who's doing, let's say, an inconsistent or hypervariable baseline or the negative split, and those that do a very easy out, a conservative, very easy out, or the all-out, overcooked or kamikaze method, they're potentially losing 7, 8 or more percent, depending how extreme their deviation is from the baseline. They're losing 7 or 8% over the ideal for them, i.e. the optimum that they could possibly obtain. That's what we're talking about here. What's the optimum the rider can do in living up to their own expectations? How near to the PB or PR can the rider get? And a lot of that is in terms of the pacing. Now if we go to Caleb Carl's output is extremely high. Now we don't really know if he's on Z-Power, but I think he probably is. He's riding road bike with aero bars in a semi-TT position. His cadence is very admirable, 695. Heart rate's high, steady. Variability is fairly low, pretty much in zone 5 stroke zone 6. I mean, his output is extremely good. We'll see if that's maintained. We just crossed the halfway mark here, so this is a really important point. And halfway to go, you really psychologically feel you're struggling. You've made a huge effort and you're not sure if you can make it back. That psychological ambiguity of I'm not sure if I can make it, that almost tells you your pacing is pretty much spot on. If you get to the halfway mark and think, I'm not sure I can make it, but I'm going to carry on, then that's good. At the halfway mark, aim for another halfway, so halfway of the halfway, so in 20 minutes, another 5 minutes here. Now, a warning sign from McPew has dropped into zone 3 from zone 4, and the paceline is deteriorating a little bit. Keep an eye on that baseline. Let's look at Mo's Tavern. Mo has gone out with pure Z2 and Z3, nearly all Z3 to be fair. But I think, having got to the halfway mark, he's realised he's undershot things. Look at his average. His average is 194 watts, but in fact, his instantaneous watts now is 145. So showing you he's stepped it up. He stepped it up, but stepping it up, 25% more than your average, that's not normally a good strategy. That kind of variability is not normally recommended. So I suspect, I'm pretty sure, that most Tavern's gone out with an easy strategy, conservative, and you're going to see his paceline increase steadily since then. Now, what can we say about Peheko? So Peheko's average is 211. He's also stepped it up. He's on to 20, about 5 or 10%, 5% increase right now. His cadence is good, 95. One of the dangers riding on Zwift, but you're doing your is you respond to the visual cues. Like if you're riding a hill, you go more all out on that hill. Now, although Zwift stops you getting the hill feedback in the FTP test, you get the visual representation of the hill. So it's important not to race up the hills or to maintain your pace basically. Now returning to Peheko there, he's stepped it up a bit, like as I say, 5 almost 10% above his average now. So he's doing the same as most Tavern, albeit in a less profound way. So he's either gone out easy and picking it up, or it's possible he's going for a negative split strategy. It's quite possible he's going for a negative split. Let's keep an eye on that. His cadence gone pretty high now, up to 100, heart rate 177. He's certainly putting the hammer down now. Let's see how that goes. Now, I'm slightly worried about McPew here. There's more instability in the baseline, and he's pretty much riding in zone 4 with the odds zone 3. 7 minutes to go, still quite a long way. You know, you can't race for home with 7 minutes to go. There's just under a third of the ride to go. So you got to maintain, you got to stay strong, but you can't ease off, but you can't race for home. Look there, look at McPew. He's had an effort which has gone down there for a second, you know, way under his FTP, you know, probably into zone 2, certainly under zone 3. So I think he's struggling. 6 or 7 minutes to go, and a lot of riders are struggling. That's 6 or 7 minutes to go. Classically, in a 20-minute ride, is one of the hardest psychological barriers to get through. You know, 5 minutes to go, you get that slight boost. 5 minutes to go. 6 or 7 minutes to go, you know, it's pretty hard. David's doing really awesome, maintaining his pace line. In fact, if anything, he's picked it up. He's picked it up a little bit in the last few minutes. Heart rate tracing going up. His efforts high, cadence 93. What did he go through? 10 minutes to go. David went through 10 minutes to go with an average watts of 273. So 10 minutes to go, 273. 15 to go, he went to 274. 5 to go, coming up. We'll see how that goes. Let's have a look at Adam here. So Adam went through with 15 to go through the 5 minute mark with 241 average watts. He's fallen somewhat. 10 minutes to go, 235, and now coming up to 5 minutes to go, 233. His pace line isn't that bad, to be honest. I think he's just suffering a little bit based on that early hot start. Remember, Adam was the hottest starter here. He really flew out the line very hard. So I think he's suffering a little bit more than the others right now, which would say he's in that semi-overcooked pace line. You notice McPew's had a few more dropouts, definitely struggling. He's got an inconsistent stroke, slightly unprepared strategy. Similar, but with a different pattern to BP Peng. Peng's still got that instability. He's going, you know, up and down quite a lot on the watts. His average 195. Let's have a look at his average over time. Winding the clock back, at 5 minutes he had 208 average. At 10 minutes to go he's 201, and he's just gone through with 195. So his pace line is progressively deteriorating. Given that deterioration, also with that second to second stroke, you know, 10 second to 10 second variability, I would say, you know, there is a problem there. He's somewhat probably in the inconsistent bracket on his pace strategy. Let's look at Mo's Tavern. Mo's doing okay. What were Mo's averages? Mo went through 5 minutes at 190 average watts, 10 minutes at 195, and 15 at 203, giving all the indications of an easy or conservative strategy, picking it up. 4 minutes left. They're getting a visual cue on the screen here. Increase the power. 4 minutes left. To be honest, 4 minutes left is still a long way out on a 20-minute ride, and I'd actually like to see the riders not increasing above their average that much. David has picked it up. If you pick it up significantly, Zwift will give you this blurred view. David's into this blurred view because he's picking it up at roughly 5% based on his you know, zone 4 or his average 283. Look, he's done well so far. I'm not going to criticize him, but going hard for that is 4 minutes. You have to be well trained to go hard from 4 minutes out all the way to that finish line. If we look at Peko though, he's really picked it up, and I would say, you know, I'm not sure. Probably a negative split strategy. He probably has gone out a little bit too easy. You know, his average is 219. He's gone up to 272. That is a major increase, to be honest. Mo's Tavern hasn't really picked it up. 3 minutes left. He's just, you know, a few percentage points above his average. Pace line's pretty even, to be honest. Have a quick look at BP Peng here. His watts dropped really low there. He dropped into zone 1. So BP Peng's struggling here. His cadence still high. That's another warning sign. If the cadence drops, it's also a warning sign. He's picked up the cadence again, but his watts are average. His instantaneous watts are well below his 192 average here. Look, he's just about hanging on, I think, BP Peng right now. The rider's got 2 minutes 15 seconds to go, and you know, it's still quite a way. Look at McPew. McPew's hanging on definitely, but he's in zone 3, stroke zone 4 at times with a few drops. We can start to summarize these strategies now with 2 minutes left. McPew's pretty much, he's dropping into somewhat unprepared, a little bit inconsistent. His average is on a downward trend. You don't want to see a downward trend at this point. So I'd say McPew is a little bit unprepared, but I'm going to give him credit. He saw it through, and it's never easy to do a 20-minute test. What would you say for David? David's pacing has been very good throughout, impressive. His current watts is more than his average. He's really pushing to the finish. 1 minute 30 to go, and he's certainly stepping up. So David's one of the most impressive here. I'd say David, he had a tiny kick at the beginning. It looks like he's kicking to the end. I would say he's pretty much following the Fast Fitness Tips ideal model. Certainly an impressive ride by David. What would I say about Adam? Adam, I'd say slightly overcooked it, but if we give him some credit, if he can turn on the gas at the finish, you know, we can call him more of a really U-shape for Adam because of that high kick at the beginning. Let's see who's going to go all out for the finish. 1 minute in, well, Caleb Carl's going, whoa, go Caleb Carl. Caleb Carl's doubling their FTP here. 800 watts, go Caleb. Got 1 minute to the finish. So what would you say? Caleb's strategy has been pretty good as well. No really criticism of Caleb's strategy. He's going all out now. He had a little kick at the beginning, big kick at the end. So I'd say Caleb Carl's got a J shape. Mo's also finishing. Go on guys, they're all finishing strong here. I'm pretty impressed with the way everyone's finishing. Everyone's finishing zone 5, possibly zone 6 for some. Sharon's giving it a good sprint. Even Mo and Pekka's giving it a good sprint. But Pew's giving it good. And they can see the line now. You know, 10 seconds to go. Sprint all the way to the line. Go guys, go on guys. Well done. Great ride everyone. So they've crossed the line now, and we can make a few conclusions based on their pace line across the whole of the ride. So let's start with McPew. McPew's pretty much did a good kick at the end, but I'd say a little bit unprepared, but not taking anything away. David, excellent pacing throughout. Now something interesting's happened here. They've crossed the line, and Zwift has already upgraded the riders because they all set a PB. It looks like they all set a PB or PR. So Zwift has automatically recalculated their zones based on how they've done as they've crossed the line here. So this is why David, his tracing has gone from all Z5 to pretty much all Z4. The reason is because Zwift has regraded him based on his new FTP of 276. And full credit, guys, to all the riders here. They've all got a PB throughout. Every rider's got a PB here. So really great job. Mostavan and Peheko were the ones that really went out fairly easy. I would say Adam did that probably U shape. I would say Caleb Carl, looking at it with that massive sprint at the end, I would say he did a J shape. I would actually put, thinking about it, Peheko in a probable negative split category. I would say Soren has done pretty much evens with a kick at the end, and I would say David has come close to the Fast Fitness Tips ideal. So guys, that's pacing. 8 awesome rides from 8 riders, putting their rides in the public domain. Credit to them. Really interesting to see how they handled that 20-minute test. I'm pretty impressed throughout. You know, no big disasters. The biggest disaster is not completing the ride. Even if you complete the ride under your FTP, you've still had a good training ride, but these riders all did it and set a PB. Way to go, guys. Wow, that's a lot of information on pacing strategies. Yes, it's a complicated area. A couple of things. Yeah, I based most of it on that 20-minute test. If you want to see how it scales up, it's basically proportionate to the length of your event. So you can scale our demonstration calculator up for the length of your event. Secondly, I'm often asked, okay, I don't have a power meter. How else can I pace? That's really a topic for another day, but pacing on perceived effort is tricky. But I will give you a couple of tips. One of my favorite tips based on pacing on effort alone is aim to get to the halfway mark nearly spent. And at the halfway mark, you should be thinking to yourself, you know, I'm almost contemplating giving up. You don't give up, but you're almost contemplating giving up. And then what you do at the halfway mark is you make it halfway again to the end. So that would be in a 20-minute, get to 10 minutes. At 10 minutes, try and get to 15. At 15, try and get 17.5. 17.5, you can nearly see the line. You know, you can aim for home then. I also like Chris Boardman's statement on pacing. He said, go at the pace you're not sure you can maintain. If you go at the pace that you definitely can maintain, you're going too easy. If you're going at the pace you feel you definitely can't maintain, you're going too hard. So go at the pace you're not sure you can maintain, you're on that edge. That's just right. That's the pace you want to aim for if you don't have a power meter. That's all, guys. Pacing with a power meter. Hope that's useful.